r/AskReddit. Doctors of Reddit, what was the craziest case of patient paranoia that you have ever seen? My father was a doctor, dermatologist. Had a patient who accused him of prescribing a non-existent experimental drug for a supposed condition that he was never diagnosed with. Tried to take him to court and lost. Sent a threatening letter after, reported to the police. After the police confronted him about it, he dropped a homemade fruit basket with a single bullet on top of the fruit at the front step of the office, addressed, but not postmarked, to my father with a creepy unsigned apology note. The basket was immediately shown to police. About a month later, my father received a letter from the guy stating he had seen my name in the paper sports section, local golf tournament results, and that he knew I would be playing at an upcoming tournament where the start times were published. There was a police presence at the tournament, something that never happens because my father reported it. My dad's nurse's husband was a local detective and pretty much followed me the whole day with my dad. The police found the guy in the parking lot unarmed and he was arrested, then eventually committed to a psych hospital for some time. There's still a restraining order against him to this day, but this was over 15 years ago and the guy seems to have disappeared. I didn't know any of this until about 5 years ago, but I remember my dad having a single bullet in his bedside table even though he never owned any guns. When I asked him about it, all he would say was someone gave it to me. I never understood the whole giving someone a bullet thing. I used to be a manager at a nice-ish beach resort and I remember one morning I had the displeasure of dealing with a real asshole. Long story short, there was one valet on duty and there were two young Asian guys outside, each with a blue BMW. Valet started putting one guy's luggage in the wrong car. One of the Asian guys was chill and laughed it off. The other one went fucking ballistic and kept on telling me to give him a free night or he would give us a terrible review all over social media. I basically told him to get lost because he was being ridiculous, and 5 minutes later the dude paces through the lobby like 3 times, each time dropping a bullet onto the floor. I was like, hey man, do we have a problem, so I can call the police? And he just took off. Weirdest fucking guy ever. Former psych nurse here. I once had a patient who believed he was Satan. Since Satan was nude, so was he. He spent much of his time in a private, secure room, and when it was time to go for some fresh air around the unit we had to bargain with him to wear a robe. I took psych like pretty much every college freshman. My professor was an amazing guy who looked like Jerry Springer. Anyway, he taught part-time because his real job was working with inmates at the state prison that housed the crazies. He told us the story of when he did his internship at Chattahoochee State Hospital. In war day, there was this guy who thought he was Jesus. He'd walk around wearing sandals and would bless people. His justification for believing that he was Jesus was that Jesus was a carpenter and he was a construction worker. So close enough. They didn't try too hard to cure him because they weren't so sure he was wrong. In Ward B, there was this guy who thought he was Satan. Satan would curse you and tell you that you were going to burn in your bed, that sort of thing. He was an all-around unpleasant patient. Jesus and Satan found out about each other. Then they kept hanging around the doors to their wards, trying to get to the other so that they could have their own little Armageddon right there in the vestibule. The hospital ended up instituting a policy preventing Ward A and Ward B doors from being open at the same time. Not a doctor, but my grandfather had Lewy body dementia. Unlike other dementia, Lewy body has a strong hallucination component. Here are a few of my favorites. My grandma was having an affair with a pharmacist. She was also running a whorehouse, which would be okay, but she wouldn't give him a cut. The Shadow Men had built an exact replica of his house, but on wheels, to use as a brothel, naturally, and were stealing his electricity to power it. That's why his switches, which powered outlets, would flip and nothing would happen. They had also dug in a basement under his house which he attempted to access one night by cutting a hole in the floor with an axe. If he took anyone looking for this alternate house, they would move it to make him look crazy. The staff at the care home he eventually was placed in was treating all the food with embalming fluid, so he couldn't eat it. He also had another doctor tell him that the medications he was on were poisoning him and that he didn't need to take them anymore. It was a roller coaster. My dad was diagnosed with early onset LBD about 1.5 years ago. I feel your pain very deeply, as stories like this are what I live when I'm home with him. He thinks our house is a hotel, and the people outside keep looking into the house at him, but will never talk to him when he confronts them. He's talked about the floating people hanging in the corners of rooms and in his closet. They're actually coat racks and his clothes on hangers. He has hallucinations of things that happened when he was in the military, and when he worked for a local sheriff's department. One time, he locked my mom, his primary caregiver, out of their room until the morning, saying she's delusional if she can't see the other people in the room and threatening to call 911 for them to do a mental health evaluation on her. Lol. I woke up late that morning. My mom was drinking coffee and was very tired as she told me this. As if on cue, my dad threw the door to their room open. My mom and I both looked over to see him standing in the doorway, butt naked, saying, "Honey, I could use a little help." I covered my eyes and my mom said, "You need to put some clothes on. You're naked." He yelled back, "I am not." And then he looked down and saw his junk. And I kid you not, channeling all of his inner Josh Beck, said, "Oh, I am," and slammed the door. We couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha. I have so many more stories of the things he's talked about. Mostly, though, I can't help but believe that his life is a living, literal nightmare. He's started getting to the point where he'll forget who I and my mum are for extended periods of time that we can't snap him out of. He turns 60 this year. I miss who my dad was every day. And I sure as hell hope this isn't hereditary. Former nurse. Here I have two. There was a guy with a rash on his feet/lower legs, seemed like a perfectly normal guy until the doctor walked in. He then proceeds to calmly tell the doctor the rash is caused by his neighbors pumping gas into his apartment via the ducts. He believed it was a dense gas that stayed on the floor and that's where the rash came from. The second lady, I'm sure, had psychiatric issues. She came in for anal bleeding. She believed this was caused by someone coming into her house at night, injecting a knockout drug into her buttocks and then anally raping her. She had pictures of her clothed behind that she had showed the police in an attempt to make a report. She did not like the diagnosis of pimples and hemorrhoids. Not a doctor, but I work with elderly people prone to delirium. We once had an 80-year-old academic at our institute. I think he was some sort of professor and obviously well-spoken, also mostly appeared to be very lucid at first glance. For months, he'd harbored the idea that he was at the center of an elaborate ritual conducted by a medieval sort of witch. Because of her spells, he would constantly phase in and out of consciousness, imagining to smoke a pipe and talk to people that weren't there at all, etc. He further claimed that he had found that there were pentagrams drawn in lemon juice and goat urine all over his apartment. His mouth was constantly deathly dry because she would fill it with the ashes of cursed scrolls and parchment. The witch planned to extract something from his body to create a flying ointment or something for her broomstick. Anyways, it was absolutely wild and nonsensical. The crazy thing was, his delusions turned out to be warranted. It was later found that his granddaughter for months had actually tried to poison him with incrementally increasing doses of belladonna extract. Student nurse here, but I still go to the hospital for internships. Had a patient come to the ER with really high blood sugar, type 2 diabetic. I asked her if she was taking her medications and she said that she didn't want to. Thinking she was referring to some type of bad side effect, I asked her what medication she was taking and it was diabinese, clopropamide for those of you who aren't Brazilian, pretty standard DM2 medication. Not a lot of bad side effects other than some skin rashes. I asked her why she wasn't taking the pills and she said, "Look at the name, I can't take something that has Diablo, devil in Portuguese, in the title. If I have to go, I shall go without any contact with these devilish chemicals like the Lord intended." It was hard not to laugh at that one, but I kept my shit together. Not a doctor, but I used to go to a nursing home to visit with people. I had an elderly lady call me her grandchild. That wasn't uncommon even for those who were completely lucid. I had many grandmas and grandpas and she was my favorite. She was very sweet and funny. She seemed to only have the occasional lapse of memory, at least that's what I thought. One day I was in her room watering her flowers. She asked me how I really was. I said fine, but she then whispered, I don't think they can hear us unless there's some device in the flowers brought. I was confused but said nope, I'm fine. She loudly said my real name and that she was happy to see me. Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me in and called me Anna, not my name, and said she could get me safe. Then went on this whole thing about them capturing me and bleaching my skin. Now she was black, I'm white. She asked if my skin was burning and not to worry because I wasn't patchy, so I could pass for a white woman and that I could still get a husband. She was worried about my children, which I didn't have any. She gave me crackers because she was worried that I didn't have food. I don't know if she had been stockpiling them for a reason, but they were the kind they occasionally got with dinner. I honestly didn't know how to respond. I was 15 and very confused. I think I smiled and tried to tell her I was safe. It was very weird and sad at the same time. I'm not sure what she went through in life, so it could have been some kind of memory. Anyway, after that day, she would occasionally call me Anna, give me crackers, and ask if I was safe. Most of the time she would call me by my real name, until about 6 months before she passed, and then she really didn't recognize me at all.